It's no secret that something strange is happening or has happened in Emerald Ranch. Everyone is scared of the owner. Both the saloon and the general store just adjacent to it are completely closed down. And sometime around midnight and noon, Miriam Wegner can be seen staring out of her window on the top floor of their residence. To add to all that, many strangers, including the one I am currently taking home to Emerald Ranch, whom I met in a random encounter, said that they too feel that the place is somewhat suspicious. This woman here specifically, for example, says that she's been asking other ranch workers about all these weird things, and yet they just told her to stop. So there's definitely a classic case of the elephant in the room. Everyone knows about it, but no one wants to talk about it. And to add to what is happening at Emerald Ranch itself, there's also something suspicious about Guthrie Farm, which is the small farm just northwest of Emerald Ranch. The first thing is that when you get too close to the residence area, the local farmers will become automatically hostile without warning, and I doubt this is just because of the coding where some characters are territorial, because usually when that's the case, they usually give a warning before they shoot. And in one of the chicken pens, there is a dead human corpse. And because no one wants to answer what exactly is happening at Emerald Ranch, or what has happened at least, we are going to attempt to solve this mystery ourselves. But before I do, can we just take a moment to appreciate this? Like, how can you not love the fandom wiki? So while I was taking this random stranger home, she mentioned how the general store and the saloon were closed, but she also mentioned that the reason the saloon closed was because there was a shootout there once. Because of this, I thought I should start my investigation there. The general store is inaccessible, but the saloon can be entered via the right side door. Inside, you can clearly see that the saloon has been unoccupied for a very long time, and sure enough, there are signs of a shootout here, including blood on the floor and bullet holes in the walls. The door to the left is inaccessible, but the door to the back leads back outside, and to the right of the saloon you can see a gravestone, that of Joshua Burgess, who was accidentally shot in 1898. I think we can assume that Joshua Burgess died in the same shooting that occurred in the saloon. And if that is the case, then we now know that the shooting happened in 1898. So just last year if you're playing as Arthur Morgan. Or, major main plotline spoiler, 9 years ago if you're playing as John Marston in the epilogue. So who is this Joshua Burgess? We learn our answer to that question at an abandoned mail wagon in the Cumberland Forest southwest of Fort Wallace. Here we find a letter addressed to Miriam Wegner from her cousin Annabelle in New York. In this letter, Annabelle mentions her condolences to Joshua, beginning the paragraph relating to the subject with, "I cannot even begin to imagine how painful it must have been for you to lose Joshua in a horrible way." So now we know that Miriam Wegner somehow knew Joshua Burgess. The fandom wiki suggests that he was a love interest, and that does seem to be the most logical explanation. But my question is, if this death happened a year ago, or 9 if you're playing as John Marston, why is the saloon and the general store still completely closed down today? I'd recommend keeping that in mind. But continuing on the letter, Annabelle mentions that this is the 6th letter that she has sent with no response from Miriam, and that she learnt from the letters of other ranch workers that Miriam hasn't been seen outside of her house for a very long while. Annabelle pleads with her to give any response just to let her know that she's alright, and she also adds a postscriptum, which is directed towards Eugene himself, asking him to stop withholding mail directed towards Miriam, if that is what he is doing. Now we must ask why Miriam never leaves her father's residence. There is a slight possibility that she doesn't want to due to her mourning, but I find this reason a bit unlikely. I think the more likely explanation is that her father is forcibly keeping her there. 1, it would not be completely out of his character to do so, It's no secret that Eugene is not liked, and sometimes when walking past their residence, you can hear what seems to be an argument happening. It's clear this isn't the most stable relationship, and if Miriam was in mourning, then her father's house would probably be the last place she'd want to stay. And I'm pretty sure she would still write her cousin back just to let her know that she's fine, if she was able to do so. So I strongly believe the explanation is that her father is forcibly keeping her in isolation. But you might ask, well, if that's the case, why did this isolation only begin after Joshua died? I believe that Eugene needed a scapegoat for the disappearance of his daughter, and I guess he believed that mourning would be a good one. Now here's another point I want to talk about, and this one will be very quick. So why is that no one at Emerald Ranch wants to talk about everything that has happened at said ranch? Well, this is clearly a classic case of the elephant in the room, which in its literal sense means a controversial issue that everyone is aware of, but no one wants to talk about. Reasons why people are reluctant to mention these specific subjects include things such as it's politically incorrect, it would remind someone of an embarrassing or traumatic event, to talk about it makes some people embarrassed or emotionally uncomfortable, it's too taboo within a specific culture, or it is dangerous to talk about that subject. And I believe the last reason is the most likely. So here is my theory about what has happened at Emerald Farm, and I will also talk about the Guthrie Farm here. Now do keep in mind, this is just my personal theory, and before I start, there's also something else I need to mention about Eugene Wegner, the owner of Emerald Ranch. Not only is he a proper asshole that is hated and feared by his own workers, he's also a power-hungry monopolist who wants to monopolize the entire farming industry in the heartlands. Now that we know that, here's my theory. The owner of the nearby Guthrie Farm is owned by someone who is a lot like Eugene, a business owner who has become drunk with power, despite that they don't really have much power to drink. And because two farm owners who want to monopolize the farming industry in the region are in such close proximity to each other, the two quickly become competition. And because two competing companies are in such close proximity, the two become extremely territorial, which would explain why the Guthrie farmers are immediately hostile, and why Eugene becomes aggressive when you step on his personal property. Sometime later, workers from Guthrie Farm go to Emerald Ranch itself, where they open their own general store and saloon, and Joshua Burgess is the one that opens the saloon. And Miriam Wegner, who has an unstable relationship with her father, begins to go out with Joshua simply to spite her father. But over time, as the two become very attached, the relationship becomes a lot more real. But alas, with the new general store and saloon, Eugene's competition is now working within his own ranch. And eventually, he simply has enough, with the Guthrie Farm screwing his business and his daughter, and devises a plot to kill Joshua Douglas, and perhaps whomever owns the general store. His plan is to make it seem as if they both died in a drunken gunfight in Joshua's saloon, and hires outlaws to carry his plan out to reduce suspicion aimed at him. His plan works perfectly, and the two shops close down now that they are without owners, but Eugene makes sure that they are never reopened again, out of his own personal hatred. And he uses this to kill two birds with one stone. He uses his daughter's mourning as a scapegoat to keep her isolated within his house, so that he can win his daughter back via the Stockholm Syndrome. But despite the fact that Eugene does not personally carry out his plan, the Guthrie farmers are well convinced that it was his doing. So out of revenge, they kidnap and lynch one of his workers, and they become even more territorial and more hostile as a result. So overall, the theory is that this is a monopoly turned civil war. So that is my theory as to what has happened at Emerald Ranch. Feel free to share your opinion in the comment section, and I will see you guys in the next one.